It'll be decision day tomorrow right here on One Soccer for the Vancouver Whitecaps when it comes to the Concacaf Champions Cup. Leg 2 against Monterrey in Mexico. Leg 1 ending in a 1-1 draw. The Whitecaps getting that late goal, 86th minute. By the way, that was set up by Ryan Gauld, who already, he's been a superstar for Vancouver. He had a strong game in that one as well. Had numerous chances, even to the point, guys, where he said afterwards, he's like, I haven't had that many chances in a game and not scored. But unfortunately, over the weekend against CF Montreal, he went out with what's being called a knee sprain. So not going to be in the lineup for this one. And I mean, Ollie, when you look at, yes, the Vancouver Whitecaps have been playing well. There's other players there, but Gauld being a superstar for them and the amount of chances that he had in leg 1, how do they approach this must-win game without him?
Well, firstly, huge relief, I think, that it is just kind of a short to medium-term injury as opposed to what I think a lot of people feared, which was going to be something much more serious when you see a player go down with a knee injury like that. So it's good news, I think, for the Whitecaps. But it obviously does make this second leg against Monterrey just that much more complicated. Ryan Gauld is the player that I think this team will be looking to, always does look to create a chance to get in position to potentially score a goal. Like, his attacking threat, I think, is clearly the standout on this team, and he's the one who you would think could make the difference if the Whitecaps can keep themselves in this game and in this tie, going into the latter stages of this second leg. I think every time you lose a player like this, like, you can't really imagine it in terms of directly trying to replace them. I think you have to change the way you play. You have to try to play to the strengths of who you have available. And I think it's been one thing we've seen from Jesper Sorensen in his time in charge so far, particularly with the way he's rotated his team game in, game out so far this season. I do think he's trying to make his team less dependent on individuals and more of a cohesive unit, and we've seen some progress in that regards. This is going to be a real acid test of that progress, I think, on Wednesday night.
Well, they're going to have to buck the trend of history. Only Toronto FC have won in Mexico in this competition, so they need to go out and do something that really hasn't been done. Yes, they don't have to win the game, but they need to score at least one and probably multiple goals in this game if they want any other result than a win because of the away goals rule here. It's a little bit different this time around, as Monterrey's not playing in their own stadium because there's a Shakira concert going on. Hips don't lie. So it'll be a little bit of a different context. And Monterrey's form continues to waver in Liga MX play right now. That may be a good thing for the Whitecaps. But this time around, I don't think they can expect a weakened side. They were dominant in the first leg, but this was a Monterrey side where Martin Demichelis made 10 changes to his team for the game up in Vancouver. Whether Sergio Ramos plays or not, by the way, he scored again on the weekend. It's not just him, it's Canales, it's Ocampos. There's so many other really good players. So I think that the test is going to be completely different. And the Whitecaps are going to have to rely upon something that maybe hasn't been talked about as much. People have been talking about Ryan Gauld and his influence, the start to the season by Jaden Nelson or Brian White, attacking players, but they've been very good defensively as well. And they're going to need to rely on their defensive shape and probably withstand some very difficult moments in this match if they plan on coming away from this fixture. So they just need to be patient. They're going to have to score a goal, but they need to pick their moments in this game and play a more tactical game than Monterrey, who are maybe a little bit more loose in terms of their playing style.
So when it comes to the odds makers here, Wheels, the Whitecaps, they're substantial underdogs. We know this in this competition as well. It's just not very easy to win when a lot of these Mexican teams, as you mentioned as well, they're already in mid-season form. A lot of the Canadian teams, MLS teams, just getting going. So around plus 400, depending on the sports book, is where they have Vancouver. Do you think that's a bit disrespectful given the Whitecaps form and the fact that many people feel like they held their own, or maybe some would say outplayed Monterrey in leg 1?
I don't think it's disrespectful. I think it's probably just about right. If you're going to make that bet on the Whitecaps to win, again, you're bucking the trend of history here, and you're betting that the Whitecaps, without their top player, without some other players as well, Jaden Nelson is still out of the team, Sam Adekubi not fit as well. You're expecting them to go down to Monterrey, who clearly value this competition. They're historical giants playing in the Concacaf Champions Cup, to go there and win. Yeah, they should be outsiders by some distance. It's not impossible to come away with a result, but I think more likely is a scoring draw than going there to win outright. This is going to be a huge challenge for this team. Remember, Andy, this is their 8th game in 22 days, and that's right out of the chute of the season. This is why you've seen rotation, and I expect more rotation in Sorensen's side ahead of Wednesday night as well.
Yeah, and where we've seen that has also been in the goalkeeping position. And you've just mentioned, Wheels, that defensively they've been good. That's the ultimate defender. So you already know who I'm going to be looking at when I ask this next question here, Ollie. I always focus it on the goalkeepers. We know this, goalie hugger here. If the Whitecaps, though, are going to pull off an upset, who do you think needs to have a big performance?
I'm not going to focus on the goalkeeper. Sorry. I'm going to go further up the pitch.
Sorry, Bomber.
The players who impact the game in the attacking thirds. Pedro Vite for me, and I know this somewhat goes against what I just said, which is that I think this has to be a collective effort and a team that doesn't rely on individuals, and I still think that's true. But Vite has been outstanding this season. We'll see if he starts, because they have rotated a lot, and he played 90 minutes on the weekend, so I don't think there's any guarantees there. But with Gauld out, he's the guy that I would be looking to turn to in terms of the creative influence that he can have on this team. Last season, Pedro Vite in 28 MLS games had 15 key passes that lead to a shot. This season, in 3 games, he already has 8. Like, he's just been so much more influential in terms of creating for his teammates and in the final thirds, and they're going to need that in this match.
Well, we'll see who he decides to play in the midfield areas. But I mean, just watching this team through its first 7 games, I think the midfield area has been the strongest of the team. So if he plays his preferred 3 in the midfield of Cubas, Berhalter, Vite, the amount of success, or if they are successful in this game, will come down to them holding shape, both defensively as well as playing quickly and efficiently in transition, and being able to cover an incredible amount of ground. Like, you can speak about the threat that Monterrey has from wide areas, but typically when these games against tough opponents down in Mexico or won or lost, is through the midfield area. So those 3 players, if he decides to choose them, if it's Prizo, if it's Ngondo, I mean, they have their work cut out for them in this game. So that's the position of the field, kind of like Ollie, I'm keeping my eye on.
Mm-hmm. We know it's been a while since a Canadian team, made it to the final of this championship. You have to go back to 2018 with Toronto FC. But Vancouver and CF Montreal recently, though, have made the quarters. CF Montreal did so in 2022, and Vancouver did it 2023. They lost out to LAFC. But making the quarterfinals is a big deal. I mean, what could this mean? Gareth, if the Whitecaps can defeat Monterrey in advance of the Concacaf Champions Cup quarterfinals, just what does that mean?
Well, a quarterfinal opponent is probably preferable compared to what some of the other sections of the bracket looks like. Pumas, I don't think that they're a powerhouse team. I don't think that they would put a threat into the Whitecaps like Monterrey are doing. Between them and Alajuelense, I think that that's a preferable draw. So that's what it means. More fixtures, more headaches for Sorensen. And my criticism of the Whitecaps is they still look a little bit thin. It sounds like they're still trying to recruit a player or 2. I mean, the time is beyond ticking. The time has passed. I think that you need to hit the ground running in an MLS season to have players fit and in form and ready to play within a team concept from the get-go. So I don't know what's taken them so long to land their targets. That for me is a little bit disappointing, because I think if Sorensen had a bit of a deeper squad to turn to rather than turning to some relative unknowns, and some of them have been good stories. Tate Johnson, great story, scoring a goal on the weekend, playing at left back. And so, Ocampo coming into the team at a very young age and showing some good form out of the gate. I just feel like they're a little bit short right now. So although, advancing this competition, I'm a huge advocate of it. I think it would mean big things. It could potentially also have a knock-on effect in a negative way for their MLS season.
I think it would be one of the biggest results in the history of the club. Like, I'm not going to say the biggest because they've played games with trophies on the line, obviously, but in terms of level of difficulty, like, this is right up there. To go down to Mexico and knock out Monterrey, I know it's not in their home stadium, but all the same, this is a top-class opponent, one of the best in the region that they're facing. And if the Whitecaps can pull this off, it's a massive, massive accomplishment and a massive night for the club. And then you do go on to probably Pumas, who I think are a more beatable team than this one, and a real shot at the semifinal.
And bigger picture here, I had some comments. I made a comment that the only disappointment of that really great Whitecaps effort last week, the only problem was it was played in front of 9,613 people at BC Place. Like, I understand that the fixture buildup, there's been a lot of home games. The Vancouver Canucks are playing that night. But if I'm a Whitecaps fan, and they have lots of fans, they were 7th in MLS attendance last year. It's not as if no one's supporting this team. They have a great fan base. They just haven't rallied around this competition. And my argument would be that they simply haven't played enough games in the Concacaf Champions Cup. Nowhere near as many games as Toronto FC. Even CF Montreal have played more games over the course of their history. It was suggested to me that this is like a made-up, gimmicky tournament. It's not. It's been around for decades. The Champions League, whether you're in CONCACAF or Europe, like, this is a big deal. This is a reward to play against the best of the best and test yourself and go out and try to win something else. This isn't a made-up competition. So I think advancing this competition, maybe Whitecaps fans will gravitate to this competition a little bit more, because that attendance for me, I guess, a really good Monterrey side, it was just disappointing last week. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
Not only is it not a made-up tournament, it pays good money. The further you go into the tournament, that is very good for a franchise. But it is a valid point, because a lot of people still support their team in soccer in this country. So if their team is not in a certain competition or going far in a certain competition, then, you can't really see them caring about that. Right. So, yeah, I think if they can go on a run here and be perennial contenders, then you're right. I think people would start to care a little bit more.
There's still a lot of challenges with this competition, let's be honest. I love the Champions Cup and watching it, but until MLS and Liga MX in particular align their calendars, like, this is going to be a conversation we have every year. So, we'll see. Hopefully.
Things might change next year. Like, I'm still am of the belief that MLS is going to adopt a winter calendar ahead of the World Cup. It just makes sense. It seems like everything that Don Garber's been saying goes that way. So you take a winter break and then you pick up where things left off at the beginning of December, whenever they decide to take that pause. And when you reset and hit the play button once again, then you come out playing cup competitions like this. So we come off a break rather than a quote unquote off season. Will that make a difference? I don't know. But that might be a preferable setup, at least for the MLS sides playing in this competition.